The best of the morning to you. This is Monday with Friday, preparing you for a better week ahead. A Jamaican saying goes like this: Jackass say the world no level. Translation: Jackass says the world is not level. Further translation: Jackass says the world is not a level playing field. I've frequently suggested to a Jamaican clergy friend of mine whom I think the presumed Jamaican jackass is, or where that jackass might be found. That remains classified information between me and my friend, so you'll have to pay me big money for that information, or kill me. The world isn't a level playing field. This thing in Ukraine, whether you call it conflict or war or assault or genocide, is another flashpoint in history demonstrating the world's unfairness. It's not life that's unfair. It's people who make wrong moves and abuse power who make the world unfair. Even if Putin's concern about NATO becoming some kind of aggressive power were valid and not a projection of his own aggression and insecurity upon his peaceful sovereign neighbor, it isn't fair that Putin chose to pursue the annihilation of Ukraine rather than work that concern through the United Nations, where Russia possesses veto power. Some say it isn't even fair that Russia or any of the nations that do possess veto power. The world is not level, and that jackass is right. It isn't fair that while seeking to escape Ukraine like everybody else, black people and other non-white people found themselves treated like the second-class humans too many whites today still think they are. Some African peoples, a minority so far, appear to support Russia. They say something like this: Russia didn't invade Africa or colonize it or plunder it. Europe did, so what do we care? True, it isn't fair that Europe raped Africa. However, China, despite their seeming agreement with America late last week that what is happening in Ukraine is not acceptable, remains nevertheless quite cozy with Putin. And there's a jackass brain somewhere in Africa warning them that that same China, seemingly benevolent all over Africa and the Caribbean with generous loans and development, is becoming the world's greatest creditor, owning 6% of the world's gross domestic product in debt. We could say that that's not fair all we want, but China didn't exactly beg or strong-arm anybody to become indebted to them. Regarding Ukraine, while it's fair for mainly Western media houses to highlight all that's happening there, it's not fair that there didn't appear to be the same level of coverage when Bashar al-Assad, aided by Putin, did his equally evil deeds in Syria. It's not fair that the world's media entities have forgotten Afghanistan, where women and girls are being returned since the departure of the US military to some of the most oppressive, regressive, barbaric, and backward conditions. Let's not even talk about whether it was fair for the USA to enter Afghanistan or Iraq in the first place. Some say it's not fair that white Ukraine gets all this attention while dark Syria and Afghanistan and even darker Yemen, Ethiopia, Somalia, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Nigeria, Cameroon, and at least a dozen other African states where deadly conflicts or insurgencies of one kind or another have been raging for decades unabated, are all forgotten, while people still die. And does anybody remember Palestine? Perhaps somebody from the media might beg off, saying, hey, when war and conflict become a way of life, we just move on to the next new one until that too becomes the norm. We can't cover everything. Well, maybe. I hear the Jamaican jackass braying very loudly. And then what about these gas prices? I know they're based on futures, meaning oil and gas moguls, they will tell you it's the market, give us prices today based on what they imagine the prices would be tomorrow. So that precludes a price drop when the price of oil drops because they're still thinking futures and high prices. That's unfair. Those highway robbers get richer every day while the rest of us stew in hardship. According to Forbes magazine, America's richest oil magnates possess together nearly $150 billion of wealth from their oil and gas interests, pipelines, and investments. None of these dozen people are among the top 10 richest Americans who claim $1.2 trillion of wealth, although they are among the 400 Americans who are all billionaires. Each day, the values of those people's wealth moves up by billions of dollars. During the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, while millions of people died, businesses foundered, and homes were lost, these 400 people's wealth increased by 40% by doing just absolutely nothing, making them worth nearly $5 trillion. 400 people out of 327 million, let alone the 7 billion in the world. That's not fair. While other Americans die for lack of food, shelter, and medicine. The masses who vote for the political interests who defend this kind of greed and create the policies that produce this kind of imbalance are the same shallow-thinking people who support government money that they call subsidies. That's your taxes and mine, fellow Americans, going to these filthy rich people and their companies. Those are the same politicians who fight tooth and nail to prevent $1 which they call welfare, not subsidies, going to homeless, hungry, poor, uneducated, sick people. None of that is fair. A 2021 study of the International Monetary Fund found that in 2020, American coal, oil, and gas companies received $5.9 trillion in welfare. Oops, subsidies. The Yale School of the Environment reports that, quote, explicit subsidies accounted for only 8% of the total. The remaining 92% were implicit subsidies, which took the form of tax breaks or, to a much larger degree, health and environmental damages that were not priced into the cost of fossil fuels, according to the analysis, unquote. The shallow thinkers who support this think that America is threatened with socialism not when these kinds of government money are spent on rich people, but when someone calls for a sliver of those resources to be spent on, say, healthcare and hunger and homelessness. You know, the Jamaican government should probably investigate whether their famous quote wasn't born when a Jamaican jackass looked on in shock and in hunger while a greedy, overfed American jackass and a privileged European colonialist jackass were both kicking the life out of him while burdening him with the consequences of their own unsavory deeds elsewhere in the world and also in the Caribbean. I am Michael Friday, and your week just got better. I'll see you again next week. Happy Monday, galloping all the way to Friday.